a meeting Friday afternoon with the military departments, with the test and evaluation organizations, with AT&L, our acquisition technology group, talking about how it is that we can bring these architectures to the table, because everybody recognizes that that's needed to improve our process, and that was the context for that discussion was around joint interoperability. And the problem being, again, individual programs developing those operational architectures, and if they're expected to interoperate, they're working off of a different set of requirements. You can imagine what happens. So this is going to be a major focus of policy, trying to get these architectures developed quickly so that the acquisition community has something to respond to. The components have a large responsibility among themselves in producing architecture content that meets the requirements for their individual mission spaces. The military departments are doing a very good job at pulling that together. But again, it's sometimes in absence of these higher level architectures. So there will be a need to pull those back together when the entire set of tiers are developed. And then lastly, when we talk about the tiers of architecture, there is this program level tier. And within DoD, that's where the bulk of architecture content has been for a number of years, focused at the program level. That's where they're developing detailed solution architectures. And it's been in absence of not only the operational context that I talked about, but also in the absence of enterprise level technical architectures. We do have the standards, but as the saying goes, they're necessary but not sufficient. So the Federation really allows us to leverage work that's going on, to connect that information and bring it into an overall picture that describes the department. That allows us to maintain content within the components. We don't have to put it all in one place. Technologies exist now for federated content, and we're exploiting those capabilities. So you're the first group to see this slide used publicly, so I'm taking a little risk here. This has not been vetted yet, so I should have probably put draft all over it, but I'm putting it out there because it really is an important concept. So if you're familiar with DODAF views, what you see there at the top is what we call an OV1. Operational context really just shows you what the environment is. And I know it's kind of small, but I'll kind of describe what's on there. On the left side, you see CONUS. You see largely a fixed node environment with big pipes moving information around through terrestrial networks. As you start to move to the right side, you're getting into the mobile environment, to the tactical environment, where we've got a lot of information being moved around while forces are on the move, a lot of satellite communications. As you move from the left to the right of that diagram, a lot of things change. Not only the bandwidth, but the devices that are used, the standards that are employed, the technologies that are available. So how do we manage across that to get end-to-end service delivery? We have enterprise services within the department, but they don't get you all the way from the left to the right. A lot of those services are focused on the left side, relying on the infrastructure that exists. So what this is depicting here, this is the high-level view of something we call our information enterprise objective architecture. The cylinder that you see below essentially outlines the information technology infrastructure areas that we need to architect for. So that has not been a focus for any particular organization. Again, a lot of that's been done program by program. But now we need to look at how do we provide that information in a consistent way so that we can get end-to-end delivery. And on the left side there, you see something that you should be able to read, document tree. You probably can't read what else is in there. But what that essentially is the full scope of content that's needed to have a consistent information technology infrastructure. At the top, it starts with policies, and as you go down through the stack, you get all the way down to detailed technical specifications. So right about in the middle is this thing called a reference architecture that I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about. The title of this slide is also the title of a document that we published. That's available on the public website that I listed on my title slide, so you can go there and download it. Reference architecture is not a new concept. It's a commercially used term, but like many other terms within the architecture space, it is in the eye of the beholder. So a lot of organizations talk about reference architecture a little differently. What our reference architecture description document does is normalizes what our expectation is at the enterprise level when we talk about those things. So it really is broken down into about 3 simple areas. It's principles, it's patterns, repeatable patterns, and technical positions. The technical positions are the types of standards that we employ, the profiles for those standards. The rules are generally business rules, something that you would see in an OV6A that's shown there on the right side of the chart. How I would characterize these reference architectures is that they're lightweight, but they're also relevant. They do set the stage. They provide for a common discussion about different areas within the technology stack that I was referring to on the last slide. They're not sufficient on their own. We still have to have solution architectures, but they normalize the space in which we talk about a particular technology area within the infrastructure. They get us down on a common path, and again, they normalize the discussion as we talk about a concept. So all of that content that you see there in the gray bubble, those are traditional DODAF artifacts. You don't have to call them DODAF artifacts. If you want to call them process models, do so. What we call them is not important. It's really what's in that particular artifact. How does that information help feed the decision process? We translate all that information into a plain English document. That's what's illustrated on the left there. This is an actual reference architecture document that has been published. I'll talk about it in another slide. You can download it from our public website as well. But what happens is these reference architectures get developed. We have a series of them, and they get published within the Federation. So the one that you do see down there is, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through this for a second here, and then I'll switch back to the one that I was going to talk about. So how do we really use these reference architectures? This slide illustrates what we do with each of the major artifact sets. Really is setting the context, setting the scope for a particular architecture at the high level. What are the operational constraints that we define through the principles? Patterns describe, as I said earlier, repeatable processes. And those are usually based on best practices. And then it gives us something to measure against. If we have these repeatable patterns, we look for the implementation of those patterns when we do an assessment. The technical positions allow us to, again, evaluate compliance, but also to manage what it is that's being